project implementation, project preparation, and management. Like we are funded from most of the donors working in Georgia. So we have two separate funds. One from the government in Georgia and other from the donors. You can see here the list of the main financial institutions with whom we work very effectively and very actively. Like most of the one, I would like highlight to a World Bank, ADB, like EIB, European Investment Bank, yeah, and EBRD definitely, and the US side. So mostly all of them are like very active partners of MDF, and we're running a lot of projects supported by those institutions. I would like to talk now. As today's topic is about energy efficiency and data gathering. I will talk about our projects which MDF is conducting in terms of energy efficiency. Last year we started together, not about 2 years ago, we started together with the Council of Europe Development Bank and E5P, the project of rehabilitation public schools in Tbilisi and in rehabilitation and increasing energy efficiency. So this project has two main components. One is structural strengthening of those buildings, and second, energy efficient rehabilitation. And we have two main indicators here, which was determined during the feasibility study. The one main point is that all of the schools were chosen in Tbilisi, which had very poor structural condition, and together with that, they had very poor energy efficiency conditions. So based on this feasibility study, it was made a list of 25 schools on which we already started working. Mm. And currently we have several projects running, like detailed design projects, and planning to start construction and rehabilitation of the schools from late in the third quarter of 2020. So here you can see the main components of the project. As I see, the main objective is the comprehensive rehabilitation and the introduction of energy efficiency measures in 25 schools in Tbilisi. And we have totally allocated 22 million euros on the project, out of which 40 million euro is a loan, Council of Europe Development Bank loan. 6 million is grant from E5P that's especially allocated for the energy efficiency works, and the 2 million is the government contribution. Our main component here in terms of energy efficiency, we have baseline that we need to in comparing to baseline data, we need to have 40% energy efficiency in the schools, in this 25 schools. Here you can see the very brief plan about the project. So we have the 6 schools in pipeline, and we think that we can start the rehabilitation works in the third quarter of 2020. In case of school 114, we will start construction works because school itself was in very poor structural condition, and it wasn't feasible to make any rehabilitation work. So we decided to dismantle the school, demolish the school, and construct a new school with new standards and energy efficiency measures. Next, also we signed a detailed design preparation contracts on 4 schools that is already ongoing, and we think that by the end of this year we will start rehabilitation works additionally on 4 schools. So in 2021, hopefully we will have about 11 schools ongoing, 11 school rehabilitation projects ongoing in Tbilisi. And hopefully, in near future, we will get additional schools from Ministry of Education to start preparation of detailed design and rehabilitation and construction later. I would say I will highlight the main point, what kind of challenges we had during this project. The main problem we had is that when we started the preparation of the detailed design, we didn't have any legislation in terms of energy efficiency, and no technical requirements. At this time, we were informed, and we actually knew that there was a work ongoing to prepare like new legislation and a new technical document about the energy efficiency. Unfortunately, uh, but uh, but we bit struggled about it because we need to follow ASHRAE standards, American standards, and that was even difficult for us because the energy efficiency is a new trend, new word in Georgia, and we do not have much experience about it. And from the start, begin from American national standards, it was a bit challenge for us. But anyway, currently we are totally sure that we are following those standards by support of many experts and specialists that are active in Georgia, like Georgia Bulashvili, uh, who supported us very much in this term. So next, we have also the other project running currently by supporting of NEFCO and E5P. This is a project of rehabilitation, energy efficient rehabilitation of 25 public buildings in Georgia. Those are like buildings of various state organizations, some schools, maybe some kindergartens, etc. And we expect to reduce 1.120 tons CO by implementing this project. We have the NEFCO loan, we have the 2.8 million for this project, and the E5P grant 1.9 million, and the Danish grant as well, 0.4 million. So these are the schools that are included in the NEFCO projects. Here is mostly the energy efficiency works, and no structural strengthening. Here you can see mostly like the insulation of the walls, windows, maybe the changing of the heating systems, insulation of the roof, etc. But currently, except these are like the two current projects that we are running right now, MDF. But we have a lot of talks with the various donors, starting a lot of
I'm
projects.
sorry to intervene. Please, 1 more minute. We are way behind schedule. Thank you. Sorry
Yes, I'm finishing already. Yeah, so it's we have already these two running projects. However, there are a lot of negotiations with other donors like KfW, EBRD, World Bank, of starting new projects and investing in energy efficiency component. And I think we will see near future starting new projects with more than 100 million euros. So this is very active phase now in Georgia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Juga, I know that you have to leave soon. And I
Yes.
have a question from Alisa to you, and Alisa also has a question to David from Geostat. So Alisa, please go ahead and ask your two questions, and then I will give the floor to Arsen Karapetyan, who also has a question to David. Alisa, please.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. And sorry, actually, I haven't noticed before that you prefer to talk before the pause. My question is, for the both projects that you have presented for rehabilitation of public schools and the rehabilitation of public buildings, how the buildings are selected in terms of putting priorities? If you have like a list of public buildings, how the decisions are made, what buildings should be included in the program, and what buildings have should be taken first in an order of priority?
Okay, thank you, Alicia. That's very important question. Actually, the first project that I talked about, it's about the school projects, right? It was like we became implementators of this project in 2019. Before this project was started by the Ministry of Education, and later, like implementator agency changed, and MDF became the implementator, like our agency. But as I know, actually, they choose the schools in Tbilisi, which were in very poor structural condition, and they included here also the energy efficiency component. So that was the main motivator, was to find the schools that was in poor structural conditions, like risky buildings. So that was the main reason choosing of these 25 schools. So I would say that this was like most deteriorated or poor structural condition schools in Tbilisi, 25 in poorest condition. So those 25 were taken, and they also included here the energy efficiency component, and they prepared also the feasibility study, including like measuring of energy efficient component and the structural part. In terms of NEFCO, like the second project, they mostly communicated with municipalities and the state agencies, and conducted local visits, site visits, and they had some indicators how to choose those buildings. I'm not aware in details how they do this, because the project manager, this project has different project manager, but I'm ready to share it, so to find out. As I know, actually right now EBRD and other donors are preparing the whole list of buildings that is owned by the government, like state-owned buildings, and that should be which should be rehabilitated in terms of energy efficiency. So I know that this list exists, so you can get it from EBRD or Ministry of Economy.
Alisa, it's me, Margarita. I would like to add some information. As Juga mentioned, that the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development is involved with this process. And first reason was the status of the buildings, because then public building is priority. Because, and as you are aware, and we have an official and obligation and implementation energy efficiency measures in the public building. As you are aware, it is 1% of the total and total amount, and we think and public building is a priority. And the question is, and what is a public building? We think that public building is this ministry's building and kindergarten and schools, also and municipal buildings. That's why and decided to implementation energy efficiency measures in the public building, especially in the schools. And before, and we had an idea, it was more than 35 buildings, but when finished a feasibility study, and we had a more clear picture and decided to implementation and energy efficiency measures only in 25 buildings. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margalita. Thank you. Alisa, your question, I think it was just answered by David in the chat. You asked, does Geostat receive already aggregated energy data or aggregates it itself? If already aggregated, what organizations do the aggregation? And David responded with the list of organizations where the aggregated data come from. Alisa, David, do you still need to have an exchange on this, or you're okay?
No, thank you. It's fine, and it just helped to. I think David mentioned it in the slides. So the aggregation is taking place before the data is sent to Geostat. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alisa, and thank you to David for a prompt response. A question from Arsen Karapetyan, who was very active during the Armenian workshop and who joined us today as well. So Arsen, thank you for your active participation. The question is, do you have data at building level? So David, can you respond? I'm checking if David is, yeah, David is here. I'm unmuting him if it's him. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think so. David, can you respond to Arsen's question on availability of data at the building level?
Hello? Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you now.
I had some technical problem. Do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
No, unfortunately, we don't have a building level information. That's why I didn't respond.
Okay. That was easy. Negative response is also a response. Thank you, David. And now we go. Sorry, I think I was muted all this time. The next presentation is by GNERC, by the Georgian National Energy and Water Supply Regulatory Commission, by Nicholas Sumbadze, Deputy Head of Electricity Department. Nicholas, will you share the screen or do you want me to do it?
Hello, everybody. I will try to share. If not, then please help me, okay?
Okay, please go ahead. Yes, it works. Go to the slide mode and start. And please, if possible, 7-8 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, I'll try to fit in time. Hello again, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experience in terms of the data collection from the Georgian National Energy and Water Supply Regulatory Commission. First of all, I would mention that, and I think our colleagues from Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development has already mentioned that Georgia has become a full member of energy community, and in this regard, we are trying to harmonize. We are in the process of harmonizing our energy legislation with the energy community acquis. So in this regard, one of the important topic is data collection and the market monitoring, and now we are trying to provide new rules for data collection and market monitoring for Georgian energy markets. But so far we have existing regulations which defines responsibilities from market participants to provide reports annual basis and specific information, technical, financial information for previous year activities and next year plans. On the other hand, we think that this information is so-called separated in different regulations. Therefore, we decided to unify these requirements, such as registration or procedures for providing reports to the Commission in one regulation, which will be energy markets monitoring rules. So this will be the one document where all market participants can find out details regarding how market is monitored by Commission, and as well as how they should register to the GNEC, as well as what type of information they should provide. We have, the Commission covers all segments of supply chain of energy activities, and we cover activities from generation started to supply. But I think for today's conference, important thing will be consumption data, how we collect this consumption data, and we actively communicate with our distribution licenses who are currently obliged to supply also electricity to and natural gas as well to retail customers. And at the same time, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Geostat, and with this regard, we also share all energy-related data with them. We tried to disaggregate consumption data based on economic activities provided by Geostat, and it's already 1 year that distribution licenses are collecting this information based on these 14 economic activities. However, this data is not very comprehensive, and it needs to be improved its quality. Therefore, we try to help them to implement different data tools and also support the communication with the customers. Now, at this moment, we receive data via post as well as online basis. However, it's unfortunately on Excel base and sometimes on PDF version. But and therefore we need to convert it in sophisticated forms and to summarize and to aggregate for the specific analysis. Therefore, we decided to design database and platform where this information will be gathered, and it will give us possibilities to provide sophisticated analysis and results of the different market monitoring rules. To summarize, now we are in process of standardizing the reports for electricity, natural gas, and water supply sectors, as well as we try to harmonize this process with the tariff application process, because this data is much more similar to the data which is submitted through tariff application process, and we don't want that the market participants provide this information several times. I think important thing is to establish online database and reporting platform, which now we are in the process of developing, and very soon we will try to put it on test mode. Maybe I can add also important thing that through this market monitoring rules, this is not only monitoring of market, but also we try to support government policy in terms of the energy efficiency and renewable energy, and in this regard, based in terms of our competencies. So based on the primary law and secondary legislations, what competencies regulatory commission will have in terms of the energy efficiency and renewable energy topics, we will try to coordinate and support government's policy in this regard. Thank you very much. In case of questions, I'm glad to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. With this, the part where Georgia participated very actively and presented the situation in the country from various angles, very active participation from the government bodies, from the non-governmental bodies, from the funds, from the we heard from regulatory commission, statistical office. So I get some messages in the chat. The participants from other countries are quite impressed with the involvement of Georgia in these issues. I would like to go ahead with the continuation of Alisa's presentation, and we still hope to have time for an exercise today. Maybe we could extend the workshop for maybe 15 minutes or so. But for now, Alisa, please go ahead. The floor is yours, and the second and third part of your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for presenting all the elements for Georgia. As we have seen, there are a lot of activities going on, and there are a lot of initiatives that are taking place, both from data production side, but also a lot of needs for data that have been expressed on different levels. And the question is how to connect it all together so the data producers and data users could actually benefit from the synergies. The next part of the workshop there will be two presentations on my side. The first is a real kind of presentation, is a theoretical structuring of all the elements, key elements of data solutions. If we want to put in place data solutions for a particular territory or organization, what elements we should take into account. And the second part, as Oleg has mentioned, is more an exercise, which I hope would be more in the form of discussion, so we could construct together and think together of the elements that already exist or could be put into place in Georgia. So regarding the key elements of data solutions, we have already seen the definition of what data solutions are, and this definition can be separated into three elements. And these elements are structural elements, like organizational and technical aspects that allow to deliver a certain value in terms of data collection, data quality, and access facilitation, for the objective to facilitate the decision making and collaboration. And we will see the three elements separately. So the major part is actually a structural element. What is it about? How it should be put into place? The deliverables, how, as you can see in the definition, it's about constant improvement. So what are actually the elements of the improvement of SHAC deliverable that could be done at different levels by different actors. And of course, we should always, no matter when we try to do something, we should think about why, and it's about defining the objectives. And we will treat these questions in not in the order of the pyramid, but we will first talk about the objectives, then structural elements, and then deliverables. So when we talk about the objectives, we should separate the stakeholder objectives from the objectives of data solution initiative. As the data solutions initiative, they involve different types of actors. It's very important not to forget why the things are done and actually what is the final purpose. The final purpose is actually to help stakeholders to achieve the professional targets and the missions. So to make energy transition efforts effective, no matter at what level, at policymaking level, at the level of administration of a city, or at the level of implementation of concrete projects, and therefore achieve the energy policy targets that are established for the territory. And when we talk about data solutions, so they should never forget actually what the potential users are doing, what are their needs and their mission. And in order to support the users, they help them to take evidence-based decisions and to collaborate. As we have heard in the presentation before, these are really the two key elements that different actors express the need to have. And when we analyze also the situation, we can see that the actors are very different, and the needs, the mission, the needs, and the way of thinking is not the same for a policymaker, for an NGO, for an engineer who is working on a concrete project, or for an academic institution. And as we have mentioned before, the level of decision making is different, but all these decisions are interconnected. And in order to make these decisions, we have all seen that the data is needed, but if the decisions are normally made like from the higher level to the lower level, for example, energy policy will have an impact on the implementation of energy programs and will have an impact on implementation of measures in the field. The data is actually coming from the level of individual buildings and is then aggregated to a much more like higher levels, like a meso level of a city and the macro level of a country. And we have seen that there exists some data in Georgia which is aggregated, but at the same time the data is produced on a small level. So the question is actually how is it possible to disaggregate it and get to a lower level of detail which can be useful for different stakeholders. When we talk about structural elements, as we have mentioned, there are organizational elements such as stakeholder engagement and evolution of legal framework, and technical elements like good data management practices and infrastructure development. And all these elements, they can be implemented either within within one organization, because any organization has a legal department, has different departments, and has a technical department, and they need to collaborate. So this can be applied really within a utility, within a municipality or a ministry. But at the same time, when we talk about data solutions initiatives that engage different types of stakeholders, we can find the same elements on a level which is between the organizations. How does the stakeholder engagement take place? Of course, firstly, it's important to identify the stakeholders, which stakeholders can produce data, who produces data, who wants data, but also what are the potential beneficiaries of the data, who actually needs it to take either professional decisions or investment economic decisions. And then to engage these stakeholders in exchange of data. When the stakeholders are engaged, they can also mutualize their efforts, because sometimes what we see in practice, the same type of data is collected by different organizations, and it probably already exists somewhere, but it's not necessarily shared and accessible, and that's why the process of data collection is repeated. And where actually the collaboration among the stakeholders could potentially go, from simple data exchange, production and consumption of data, data could be actually used for collaboration, where stakeholders, based on the data, they exchange the ideas, they exchange the challenges and the missions they have better understanding, so they can create value. For example, they can create a dialogue on what are the indicators that can be useful for different types of stakeholders. So stakeholders could use one indicator, a common indicator, to understand each other and to take informed decisions. And what is also important in the initiatives is expanding of a network. It's not realistic to engage everybody at the same time, but it could be seen as a process of construction. It starts small with one organization, with some partners joining in, and then it can expand and have this inclusive vision. That's what has been done, for example, in Geneva, with all the partners that started to join, to provide the data, but also to benefit from the data of others. When we talk about legal framework, there are two major directions of work. Of course, there is a legal framework for data initiative, that if there is something that is put in place, it should have a scope defined, the objective defined, and the way of organization, but it also covers much bigger aspects of legal aspects that doesn't concern one data initiative in particular, but the data use questions in general in terms of data use and data protection. What do different stakeholders have right to do or not with data, especially personal data? And there is a lot of developments currently going on EU level, and these are the new questions that arise because the technology evolves, and if the legislative process is organized in a way to give a clear message, then the actors will understand what they're capable of doing and what they don't have a right to do. Because if they are not informed, the general tendency is not to do anything, just to be sure that there is no legal violation taking place. So this aspect is also very important. As for good data management practices, of course, in any organization nowadays, there is still a lot of data which is not digitalized, so it's all the aspects of how to make data digital. And then the next step is how to start to share this data with other organizations. And then from simple sharing, how to use data to create useful insights, useful information, useful indicators, so the different stakeholders that would actually have a dialogue and collaborate. And also this process, again, should be seen as a continuous improvement, because there exists no organization in the world that already has everything digitalized and perfect, and the needs evolve and the technical capacities evolve. So this should be done step by step, gradually, and be adapted continuously. And as for infrastructure development, there are two main aspects. First aspect is how the access is organized. So it's regarding simple consultation, but then access to data source. And now there is also an evolution in this on this side, because there is still a lot of exchange of files. For example, Excel sheets by email. There are some solutions which are done to have secure exchange of files. Some teams, they start to use shared folders. the next step is actually copying or synchronizing the databases, and what is now maybe the most popular is and is considered as a top solution for IT is the development of online services, of web services API that allows to build upon the developments of other organizations. For example, there are many organizations like Google producing maps, and they create an API that can be integrated in any other website, in any other application. So the organizations willing to have a map within the website, they will not start reprogramming everything. They can just consume the service offered and the data offered by Google. But this is done not only by corporations, but also by different public institutions. So when they have information, they put it available via web services, either public, so it can be addressed by anyone, either secure, so it has only those actors who have access rights can access certain type of information, and they don't have to store everything at their own infrastructure. And as for the tools, it's also, there are many technical solutions for developing tools or software. Of course, it depends on the purpose. It's actually who is the final user of the software and what types of missions or objectives the user has, because the needs for functionalities would be very different from the decision maker who does the policy assessment to the engineer who does the calculations for individual building, for example. And the functions and the purpose also can have an impact on acquisition options. Two major groups of acquisition options is either building software on your own or having a software which has been developed by someone else. And for the software that has been developed, there are two options. One is free, which is called open source software. So there are currently a lot of different programs that are free for use for different functions, but there are also programs which are under license or are sold. Sometimes they offer better support for usage and better interface, but sometimes the free software is actually working pretty well and sometimes even better. And all these things that should be taken into account when choosing the software, and it also depends how the development is managed. Because before, the tradition was to study the needs of the users for pretty long time. Like the study was conducting like for 1 year, 1.5 years, and then all the details up to the button and the color of the button were written, and then the software engineers were developing the program, and the program has been released 2 years after. But currently the situation is changing so fast. The needs of the users are changing fast, and the technology too. And this kind of approach is requires a lot of investment, a lot of money, and brings a very high risk that at the end of the project, the product that has been developed doesn't correspond anymore to the needs of the users. So there are also all the questions of how to put efficient management practices within the organization to make the project sufficiently small, sufficiently agile, in order to build with small pieces and adjust to the development of the situation. And of course, it requires the set of mind of constant improvement and development, and accepting that some things that have been done, they're probably not the most optimal, and trying something new, which requires a lot of change in working culture. But if it's done for what I have seen in practice, it's actually liberating a lot of creative energy, releasing stress at the for the collaborators, and they're actually willing to try and innovate. And this is really interesting field to work in. So the 4 structural elements, they are put in place in order to ensure the deliverables that consist of improved data collection, improved data quality, and facilitated access to data and information. When we talk about improved data collection, first, it's actually asking the question for whom data is collected. Because what is a normal situation, people, when they do their work, they are mainly focused on their own mission, on what are the specific tasks, and they don't necessarily have a questioning or have access to information of who would potentially benefit from the data they are collecting. And sometimes making small changes in collecting a couple of additional details could create much bigger opportunities for other stakeholders. And that's why it's very important also to establish a feedback mechanism, an exchange between different stakeholders to what is actually useful, what needs to be collected, and what can be improved. For the formats, of course, as I have mentioned, a lot of data is still in paper or is digitalized but not put in databases. And these are all the questions on if we put the data in databases, so it can be used by different stakeholders and it's much more efficient. How make it in a way that is that helps the data to become compatible with other data sources? For example, if an organization is saving information on addresses of buildings or on the companies, if the classification of the companies or the identification codes of the individual buildings of companies is actually the same as in other organization, it makes it easier and realistic to combine different data sources. And in order to make it, ideally, it's good to have standards. One of the standards, for example, for collecting addresses is a unique identificator of a building, which normally should exist at the national cadastre organizations. And if it's made accessible, then all different stakeholders can use this standard and implement it in their databases. So all the data could become compatible. And of course, it's also the question of optimization and synergies. If there is an exchange between the different stakeholders, they could avoid doubling work and maybe benefit from the efforts of one another. As for data quality, what is also seen in practice, sometimes we try to have the best data possible, the more exact data possible, but it really depends on the task. Of course, when we do an energy audit and we will plan the concrete energy works, we need the measured data, which is the most exact. But for some other tasks, like estimation of overall energy consumption for a city, or having an idea of performance of the buildings, some metering data or even some estimates could be used. For example, extrapolation of the data for the buildings that have provided the consumption data to the buildings that have no data at all. And of course, metadata is a crucial element for data quality because it helps to understand what data is about and to avoid some misinterpretations. And we have seen that there is already work done with regard to metadata, also in Georgia. And this is a very interesting field. And if the metadata is standardized also among different organizations, it helps to compare the data sources, interpret whether it's compatible and comparable. And as for facilitated access to data and information, it's very important to save raw data because sometimes in the methodologies change. For example, the formulas of calculating statistics for energy efficiency of buildings, it can change from one year to another. And if the raw data is not stored and only, for example, energy efficiency indices are stored, it's impossible to retroactively make the calculations for the previous years, so the data becomes uncomparable. And of course, for the tools, for the software, as I have already mentioned, it's actually improving gradually the possibilities of having software and of software having that is optimal and that really helps the actors to take informed decisions, to work effectively, save time, and collaborate. And it's possible to start with small, simple solutions. As I have mentioned, some of them are free, and then and the solutions which are either general already provide some access to information, but then become customized to help stakeholders to have help in the specific functions, but then also to have interconnected tools. For example, when the information coming from different energy projects, audit projects, is synchronized with the tools that used by, for example, municipalities or by policymakers to monitor the implementation of the program, that could actually help the collaboration and the vision of what's going on along the chain of implementation and along the decision-making chain. To summarize, when we do analysis of data solutions initiative, we firstly think actually why we take the initiative, what is the mission. We should take into account the current state of the structural elements and the possible improvements, with an idea to be able to act on the 3 deliverables concerning data collection, quality, and access. I'm going fast because I hope that we will have time to make an exercise. So with this theoretical presentation, we have finished 2 parts, the review of international experience and the review of inputs from Georgia. And now I suggest to pass to the question of possible synergies. So to make an exercise to see what is already possible, what are the gaps and barriers that exist in Georgia, and what can be potentially done. Do we have at this point some questions?
Alisa, I don't see any in the chat, and I don't see any raised hands either.
Okay.
So I think we can go with the start of the exercise, and then there may be questions during the exercise that will be more relevant for Georgia. So Alisa, please continue.
So for the exercise, it's first time we try to do exercise, and we do it in a short time format, in a web format. So I hope it will work out. What I suggest is to make a theoretical case study of a really small situation, small task of a municipality, either like energy manager or analyst, that actually has an objective to identify buildings that he or she should propose as candidates for envelope renovation in the context of an energy program. So there is an energy program, there are subsidies that can be provided to a limited number of buildings. So how to make a decision what buildings to choose. So the task, yes? The task is to get or to make a list of buildings of the municipality. It can be either, we can also discuss whether it's only public buildings, maybe it's one approach, whether it's all the buildings within the municipality, it's maybe not the same. So then the second step is to get data on buildings, energy consumption, and characteristics. For example, whether it's a school, whether it's a hospital, the surface, and other details. Then produce or get energy performance indicators allowing to compare the buildings among each other. Because if we have, for example, 50 public buildings, but we need to choose only 3, how do we make this decision to identify priority candidates? And then the last question, how actually the results can be presented to decision makers? The analysis has been done, but what are the tools that can be used to communicate the results? And this is the proposed case study. Maybe not everything is pertinent, it's a bit different for Georgia, the tasks, for example, the list of tasks. So the inputs from your side, from the side of participants, are the most crucial in this part. How we could proceed, I could briefly present the illustrative example of this case study. What would be the thinking for the case of Geneva, what we could see that is possible, potentially possible to do, and then actually have a discussion and construct this scenario for a municipality in Georgia. So how do they make all these steps? And then discuss what are the possible next steps, what could be learned from this exercise. So for the analysis of the case study, there will be only 2 elements. First is asking the question of what stakeholders actually have data on energy consumption and on building characteristics that can be accessed by a municipality, and actually how an energy manager can proceed in terms of access to data, analysis, and presentation of the results. And always keep in mind the 3 questions. What is the current situation? What are the major challenges or disadvantages of the current situation? And what can be potentially improved? Is it clear? We will see. I now have comments. I can see the chat, so if you have any questions or whatever, please don't hesitate to put the questions at the chat. So if we take an example of Geneva and we ask ourselves, what are actually the stakeholders that hold data either on energy or on building characteristics? Firstly, it's of course a cadastre. Cadastre has information on all the buildings, on the addresses, even geographic information. They have a map, they know whether a building is devoted for residential use, whether it's a mixed use, how many floors, what is the surface, and so on. This data is not accessed directly from the cadastre, but the cadastre shares this information with SED, which is a portal that unites information from different stakeholders. And SED can have data in open access on buildings, but they can also have data on energy. For the buildings that have reported heat consumption index or the data on the heating systems, this data is also available as SED. Of course, there is also a utility company, and utility company has data on all the bills and other information for all the buildings that is under the surface of the utility company. And sometimes they have even more details from field measurements, but it's not about every building, it's only when if they had some specific specific interventions. And municipality in this case can be seen, it can have a kind of double role. A municipality, it receives energy bills, and it can be treated the same way as a building owner, because they know their own building consumption and they know the buildings. It's maybe not exactly the same for the rest of the buildings within the territory of a municipality, because there are also, like, the bills are of course sent to the building owners, and municipality doesn't always have access to this information. And in case of Geneva, if a municipality needs to access data of inhabitants within its territory, there is a legislative process which is previewed when it can require data from a public entity, for example, from a utility company, this requirement is actually, this demand is public. There is a portal, there is a state portal which describes all the information requested from one public entity to another. And then the legal department of an organization who has to provide data evaluates the demand and whether the demand is actually in connection with the mission of a data or potential data user. For example, municipalities, it's under the mission to make an energy planning and to promote energy efficiency. Then the decision is made to share the data of energy consumers within the territory of municipality. So they can potentially access this information as well. And of course, we have other actors who can have some more details on the buildings. These are the energy professionals who implement the project in the buildings. These are the energy programs that provide subsidies and other types of support, as we have also seen for the case of Georgia, to renovate the buildings. And of course, we have different types of research organizations and evaluators that receive contracts and study the buildings in more detail, or are capable of making some estimates, extrapolations for the buildings with unknown data to complete the missing parts. So what does the energy manager of municipality have as an option to access data? Of course, maybe the easiest part, its own data, which is stored in municipality. In the case of Geneva, they can also freely use SED. All the data sets are public, and as I have mentioned before, they can also require the utility company to provide the data, but they need to go through a legal process of a demand and validation of this demand. And what are the options for the energy manager to make an analysis? First question is how data can be accessed. The first level of access to data is actually using the own data sources of municipality that are not necessarily put together. In any organization nowadays, there are many Excel table sheets, different text reports, and sometimes there are some information already kept in a database. So this information can be collected. And what is possible to make with this information is actually the most common practice is to put all the details in one table sheet and then make calculations to estimate, for example, the performance of municipal buildings. But in this case, the challenge is that energy manager would need to come up with their own methodology of what formula to apply in order to make the buildings comparable between each other, to be able to make a prioritization. And with this level of technology put in place, how data can be presented, of course, it's the most common now practice, it's PowerPoint slides. So some tables and graphs can be put on it, but they are not automatically updated, of course. So if like in 1 year or in 2 years, the energy manager will have to repeat the exercise to choose new buildings for renovation, he will have to repeat all the steps of data collection and data analysis to come up with the indicators for the decision makers. The second step, which is possible, is actually whether if there are some external data sources that can be used, at least in consultation. So in the case of SED, there are maps which can be consulted. Do you see now my screen with the map?
Yes, Alisa, we see the map. Thank you.
So it is the easiest way of access to external data, the most maybe simple one. So the energy manager would actually ask a question about the building. For example, he will put an address, try to find it, go to see the building, and then put some details and see the details of the building. But and then copy this information and put it in the Excel file. This is also, it has been like maybe 2 years ago, the majority of my colleagues, they were doing this exercise by hand. So there was a lot of manual work. You can imagine if you have only 3 buildings, it's one thing, but if you have 200 buildings and you need to update this information, it becomes very time consuming. But with this, at least with some external sources being available, it's possible to use, for example, the indicators of energy efficiency buildings that have already been calculated and reported, probably combined with own calculations or not, but it already gives some preliminary estimates of what buildings could be potentially interesting, and starting maybe analysis from them. The more efficient option would be, instead of consultation, is actually downloading the dataset. So you can see the same dataset on heat consumption index with all the metadata which is provided. What is important here, for any building in Geneva, you have a code, it's called EGID, but actually it's a unique identifier of buildings, and this is the federal identifier, so there is a cadastre of all the buildings in the confederation, and every building has a unique code. And no matter what data set is made currently in the state, they use the same code, so all the data sets can be combined. And before, we did not use this code, for example, for our own energy projects, which made it very difficult to combine the information that we had in our own Excel sheets or in databases with information and geographic services of ECTG. And the work that has been done is actually to putting this unique identifier to all the buildings that we had in our information system. And what does it allow to make? For example, if you have a map that has been created for a territory, this is a map of all the buildings in the canton. This is another layer, and you can see EGID here. You can connect your Excel file, whatever you have, through this key, and already project your own information on the map without having to create the map. So how you can do it? You can do it because you have access. Do you still see my screen? You
yes,
can.
Alisa, it's fine.
Yes. Okay. So you can directly download the the mapping file from a ECTG website. So you download it to your computer and you can analyze it with the software, with the map software. And as I have mentioned, there is some free software that can be installed that can allow do this kind of work. For example, there is QGIS. I have also left all the links to different information. So if you're interested, you can put. Hello, Oleg, do you still hear me?
Yes, Alisa, there was a problem with my internet connection. I'm back now.
Mine completely crashed, but I will open the presentation from the website so we can continue.
Yes, please. There
Do
was
you-
something with my Wi-Fi. It's now reconnected. I hope we didn't lose everybody. I'm back and I see you, so I assume others
Do you
are
see my
also
screen?
live. No, we see your picture. It says viewing Alisa's applications, but there is nothing on the screen. It's black.
Okay, then I had some technical problems, so I had to open the presentation from the website of the
Okay,
workshop.
it works now.
But it should work,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
So actually, so this is the option of already downloading and using the data, but the next step, maybe the latest step, is actually using the web services instead. Because if you download the file, it doesn't get automatically updated. And if you will have to make an exercise, like in some time, of if you want to monitor, if there is some information that you need to monitor regularly, you can also use the web services. So the web service is actually the link that you can also find instead of the function of download. You can have a link that you can put in your own program, and then the information will be automatically, like the program will automatically connect to SED base and give you all the recent information. And to make the analysis, of course, the maps is very good, it's very visual, but currently there is also a lot of work which is done with regard to business intelligence software. And this is the software that allows to make interactive dashboards with interactive graphs, tables, maps, make filtering. So currently, for example, if you have information for the city, you can filter, you can choose only one district, or you can choose only schools, or you can choose the buildings that have been constructed in the period of 1960s to 1980s. And all this information is automatically updated. And again, you have the full list of different software, which is free, which can be downloaded. And this software can be connected to your own files on your own computer, like your Excel sheets, to the databases of your organization and to the web services of other organizations. And it gives really a lot of time saving, but it for the persons who perform the analysis, but it also facilitates the communication with stakeholders that need to take decisions. And there are also some paid versions, of course, of the software. You can also find the link in the presentation. I wouldn't say, like, these are the different options that exist currently. The majority of actors are not using the latest versions. The majority of actors are still maybe copy-pasting the data, but the data is already still available, like through interactive maps. And I would like to open a discussion. I would like to open a discussion with colleagues from Georgia, if especially like with regard to municipalities, with regard to municipal buildings, if there are some elements that you find that are in common in terms of tasks, in terms of data, what are the actors that actually have data, that can share the data with the municipality? What is actually the state of the data in the municipality, and what are the tools that are currently used, and what are the potential developments in terms of the access to data, the analysis that you could see that could be applied, for example, for a municipality in Georgia?
Thank you, Alisa. I am addressing colleagues from Georgia. If they if they are ready to participate in this exercise. And I'm picking up on Margalita. Maybe you could start. Margalita, please. Unless there are other volunteers.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I did not see in this question. I'm so sorry.
Margalita, it's on the screen now. It is okay. And Alisa is moving it. Stakeholders holding data. This is the first table. So you could see who we have as stakeholders and what energy data they might have on building characteristic and energy consumption. So maybe you could comment on that. And then if there are some views, opinions, information from others, they would also comment on that. It is on your screen now.
Yeah, and thank you so much, and Oleg and Alisa, thank you for very detailed information. I would like to say a few words about and how to collect it and data, how to using in the energy sectors and what is in the priority and so on. And firstly, as you know, in the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development, it's a key, it's a policy makers, and we are working of the policy part and what is in priority and how to implementation and new regulation and what is an obligation at the first stage and so on. As regards and other stakeholders are in some entities, including in Geostat and GNERC and Georgian State Electoral System and municipalities and the CITPOL and so on. And all stakeholders and will collect all information and mostly it's from a Geostat. As you are aware, and representatives and from Geostat and Mr. David and introduce and information how and collected data information and what is in the energy balance and what is in priority and what is in key challenges and advantages. And all information is there. And as regards and municipalities, and here is and more detailed information and consumption of electricity and gas, also when they received information from the distribution companies and including an electricity and gas issues. And probably you know we have two distribution companies in the electricity system, also when a few in the distribution company and in the gas sector. And all information all information in the Geostats and plus and some entities and probably you know and some methodologies and needs and more detailed information and like and consumption in months and for example consumption in days and so on and so on. And all stakeholder and works in the works of the similar issues. As regards and Ministry of Economy, and as I mentioned, and we are in policy makers, we are working of the action plans and including an energy efficiency. We are working on legislation part, and Zaza mentioned and already and adopted and one and law. It is in the labeling in the energy efficiency field as regards and second and energy efficiency law and energy performance for building, which is very important and for us because here is and a lot of obligation, like and obligation in the public building, in the households, in the generation, in the power generation, and so on. And now, and we are in the final stage and in the legislation, and I think, and the beginning of in June, and having a concrete decision and from the government what we need, how to implementation of energy efficiency. As regards, and now I would like to say a word about and energy efficiency measures in the building. As I mentioned in today's workshop, and it's very specific directions, including in public building. And as I mentioned, and we know what is in the public building, and kindergarten schools, and ministers building, and state companies building, and so on. We know what is in concrete and obligation, and will start in next year in 2021. And what is in benefits and for us? Benefits is a maximum and energy security, energy saving, CO2 emission reduction, because and as you are aware, and we signed of the Paris Agreement, and we have a concrete obligation in energy efficiency field and renewable energy. As regards data collection and information about the data, it's how to say, it's a key pillar. It is very important part and for us, because and we need a calculation, or for example, to decide it, and how to implementation and the concrete measure in the buildings, in the industries, in the others, and the second is also when the data collection in the future, and how to implementation all measures in the future. I think in geostats it's a key and main stakeholder in this project. Also, when others and stakeholders like energy companies and municipalities or and so on. But in geostat, it's key driver in this project. Yeah. Again, thank you, Alisa. Thank you so much. And it's very important your experience and structure elements in the building sectors, in the energy efficiency measures. I think and structure elements and roles of stakeholders and all infrastructure development issues, it's very important for us. Because now when we are in the beginning stage in your experience and concrete and decisions and concrete and case studies, since it's relevant and useful, and for the Georgian government, especially in the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. And actually, what we have seen, you correct me if I don't give all the details right, but as far as I understand, one of the elements of legislation that is currently developed is an energy efficiency index or indicator for buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And that the public buildings, they will have an obligation for renovation, and it's a pretty substantial program, because if it touches even 1% of public buildings, that's really a lot of buildings. And we have seen that Geostat is already in place. They already have a lot of information that is collected, and they have even cartographic function, the metadata. So are there. We have also seen the presentations by the municipalities. For example, Etuna Lomadze from Batumi municipality, she has mentioned that actually when they were performing the project, they were interested in consumption data and in public registry data on the building level. The need is there. There is a need for indicators on buildings. There is an interest of municipalities to have information on a lower scale, on a scale of building or municipality. And there is actually all the expertise from Geostat, and there is also the support, the policy-making support from the ministry with regard to promotion of energy efficiency targets. So the elements are there, and it's more actually the questions maybe about all the structural elements, that what are the capacities of maybe disaggregating data even at the example of only one municipality. Because if the project is so big that it touches the whole country as a whole, it's something that is very big. But are there actually some interest or capacities of taking an example of even one municipality and seeing how the data on individual buildings can be collected, by whom, the energy efficiency indicators, the preliminary energy efficiency indicators be produced, and how actually it can be put in a system like Geostat for the use of the actors. And this is maybe the reflection, like we probably don't have time to do it now, but that we could potentially have, because it's actually more about making dots, because the elements are there, they just need to be connected from my from my impression.
Yeah, and Alisa, and first of all, and it's very pity, but we have not and the whole and register of the buildings. And we had some projects, and it was probably in 3 and 4 years ago, an energy efficiency center involved in this process. We have the information about the building. I mean, categorize also, and I mean, an information and number and characteristics and so on, but it's not official. We have some idea. We have some not exact number, but have some information and what is in Georgia. But we think in the near future and have a final version of this building and the rest of the building. It's very important. But now I'm talking about an official decisions and official and final version of the building rest, because it's very important for us, because and one question from the potential donors is what is the situation? What is the building and how many buildings is the public, and what do we think and in cities, in the capital cities, in other regions and so on. As regards a municipality, as you are aware, today we have 24 municipalities which signed of the and current mayor projects, and 12 municipalities and prepared a sustainable energy action plan. What is an aim of the sustainable energy action plan? Here is two main pillars. First is energy efficiency in the buildings, and second one is renewable energy, because renewable energy is why it's important. We think and maximum utilization of the renewable energy also it's a priority. It is security and for the energy sectors in Georgia. That's why and the renewable energy is a priority in the building issues, like in the solar PV system and biomass using and so on and so on. And 12 municipalities and prepared and the action plans, and already we know and two main pillars is here, and municipalities in yourself and calculations, for example, and, what is the situation in the building and what we need, and how for example what will be, and for example and some energy saving and so on. And it is not how to say, it is not an official calculation, but it is a calculation and like an energy audit and like in the feasibility study and pre-feasibility study. It's only. And as Karina mentioned, and Karina introduced information and the full package of the energy efficiency measures in the kindergartens, and which and implementation, and Karina's organizations also in the which finding and you. And I can say, and it's not enough. It's not enough. It is a calculation of the concrete buildings and calculation of the house of the and the public buildings. It's not enough. It is a very small percent of the total building in my countries. I think, and first is then we are talking about challenges. What is challenges? First is then the lack of information. Also, we are talking and lack of legislation, but we know when the beginning of June and haven't then final decision from the government. But I think and lack of information, lack of and methodology, and the lack of and calculation, it's a big and challenges in the building sector. As you know, and when and we were in the Soviet Union, we had and typical and technical regulations, and the Russian language is SNIPs, technical regulations in the buildings, and it was an obligations and for the government or for the private sectors and for owners. But now and probably you know, and we signed of the association agreement, and here is and the different rules and difference and directions, because and it is in new directions. We want to harmonize and we want to aid in the reality energy policy in my countries. Also, I would like to say, and we have a special department in the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development, and two guys and were here in this meeting probably, and now I don't know exactly, but now and probably, and they are now here. And we have a construction department which works of the technical issues and which works of the technical data and technical regulations in the buildings, already prepared some technical and methodology and some technical regulation, I mean, and secondary legislation and secondary acts, which is also an obligation from EU directives. Probably here is an Irakli, please to add some information in the building sector, because in your professional and to know and more detailed about the issues. But generally, it is in the both and department, energy reforms and policies, also within construction departments, and to work together. And we are in policymakers and more technical component is in the construction department. Yeah.
Thank you for all the inputs. I'm not sure whether we should, given that we don't have any more time left for the workshop, whether there are some other comments with regard to reflection on the structure, on the current state of structural elements and deliverables in Georgia that the colleagues would wish to share. Otherwise, I would pass the word to Oleg.
Okay. Yes, I do not see any hands raised or any questions in the chat. There was a question from our colleague from Armenia about Margalita, and Margalita, I shared your credentials at the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development, so that he knows that you are deputy head of Energy Policy Department. And so we are coming to the end of our workshop. We are actually on time now. I think it also is related to the fact that it is quite late in Georgia now. It's 7 o'clock in the evening, and people started to leave the workshop. It is understandable. It's past the work time, and when we are all telecommuting, it's probably even more taxing on us. However, I think the workshop was again very successful. We had one for Armenia 2 days ago. It was in Russian. By the way, the recording of that workshop, the first part, is already posted. We will also post the second part of the recording, most likely tomorrow. And we will post the recording of this workshop, which is in English, also in the coming days. So it will be available for you to look at. Very interesting information in both workshops. First, from our training facilitator, from Alisa, who essentially showed what is possible, what can be done. And then we also looked at what things are already done, what information is already collected in Armenia and Georgia. I'm covering both workshops now, and what is missing, and how things can be improved, and how they can be used for improving energy efficiency in buildings at the municipal level, at the neighborhood level, and so on. And we are very happy today with the involvement of various Georgian stakeholders. It really shows the interest from the country. And I think both Alisa and I, and we assume Georgian colleagues, really appreciated that. So it was very interesting exercise. I would also like to say thank you to my colleague from ESCWA, Monji Bida, who invited a number of people from the region, from the Arab region, and who participated in this workshop. I hope it was useful for them as well. I am expecting some feedback from Monji and from his colleagues on what they hear from the colleagues in Tunisia and Jordan. So with that, maybe some final words to Alisa and to Margalita this workshop, please.
And first of all, thank you so much, Oleg. Thank you, Alisa, and thank you, and all participants and speakers. And I think in today's meeting was very successful. What is the reason? Reason is, and here on and all stakeholders. I mean, a non-government organization and government organization and NGOs and municipalities and regulatory commission and so on. I think and all stakeholder and were here also, and it's very important. And we had the practical projects and my colleagues and talking about and challenges and advantages. Also, and here was a very important presentation from Geostat, because and we are talking in regulation, we are talking in decision, but what is important? Important is in the data collection. In the other ways, and we cannot take calculation and decision what we need in the building and in the industry in other places. I think and 2 days and workshops and was an informative, and also and was and information exchange and your experience, Alisa and Oleg and UNECE. Also, and thank you for and ESCWAS and participants, because and Georgia and the working hardly of the similar issues, but we need an experience from UNECE, from international organizations, and from an international experts and so on, because and your experience and your successful project is the best case study and based and the proposals and best case study and for Georgia. Again, and the special thanks and for Alisa and Oleg, special thanks for and stakeholders and speakers. I think and our cooperation and will continue. And later, and Oleg, I will share and information and with all participants. I mean, and the presentations also, and the links and very useful and links and what is in the more detailed information. And we'll introduce and all data and all information with our and key players and key stakeholders. Again, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Margalita. Alisa, maybe some words from you.
Yes, thank you also very much on my side for to the organizers of the conference of helping to make it happen. It was very interesting, and I'm very impressed and grateful also for all the participants from the Georgia for having such a rich variety of participants coming together and sharing actually what they're working on, what are the challenges. It was extremely insightful and very interesting. And I would also thank especially like Oleg for helping to make it happen, and the colleagues from the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development, Margalita, Natalia, Nicolos, and Tamar. It was a very big pleasure to work with you, and been very active to helping make this happen, of bringing the participants and giving the inputs. And it was a very big pleasure. So I hope that like this is the first workshop that we had on the topic together, and I'm hoping that there will be other opportunities so we could continue to have an experience exchange and work on this very interesting and challenging topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think a lot of thanks should go to Alisa, who really made this workshop possible. And of course, many thanks to our hosts in Georgia. Again, I would say my apologies, but it really out of our control that we couldn't do it physically in Georgia. So I do hope that we can do, and I wouldn't say repeat, because we can do it in full format, a workshop on the topic, and maybe by then situation in Georgia would be more advanced, but maybe do it next year live in Tbilisi, and similar one in Yerevan next year. Would be very happy if that could happen. I would also like to thank my colleagues from UNECE, Yelena, Laurence, and Katrin, who have been working tirelessly behind the scenes, helping with posting the presentations and draft agendas that have been changed so many times, and posting the recording and posting them on YouTube and so on. And it's not finished, of course. We will continue with this. But we promise to have, I think we now have almost everything for Armenia workshop on the website. We have most of the things for this workshop already on the website. So please come visit the website. You can also, in a few days, you will be able to see again and listen to the recording. I would also like to thank again colleagues, well, participants from Georgia, of course, but also participants from other countries. I know we had people from Kyrgyzstan, from Croatia, from Belarus, and I'm sure I'm still missing some countries. I already mentioned Tunisia and Jordan and Lebanon, colleagues from ESCWA and ESCAP and the Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency. Colleagues from Armenia participated in today's workshop, and colleagues from Georgia actually using their own holiday. Some of them participated in the workshop in Armenia. So again, this was for me a very interesting exercise. Essentially, my personal first time I was moderating an online workshop, and I think it went generally quite well. We had a few glitches, but not too many, and we are actually pretty much on time. So thank you all, and we'll be finishing now. Thank you.
Thank you. You are a great moderator and all, like, yeah.
Thank you, Margalita.
I hope to see you all in person soon. Yeah, I think.
We hope so too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.